Good morning. Welcome to the CyVerse webinar on Docker. CyVerse, formerly known as iPlant, does webinars periodically on topics that we think our users will find interesting. My name is Roger Barthelson. Apendra Devashetty will be presenting some of the material, and Martha Narrow is helping behind the scenes. If you have questions, type them in the chat window, and we will get to them by the end of this first section, and that should be in about 20 minutes. So to start out, just to let you know, this whole tutorial will take 45 minutes, maybe a little more, but and the slides will be available to you after the webinar, so you don't have to try to copy down everything that we. And as I get started, I wanted to let you know that the Docker, if you haven't already done this, on their website they have a section you can see up at the top here, Get Started, and it gives you all the information you need to install it and gives you little tutorials to help you learn more about Docker and how it works. So I recommend that if you haven't already done it. It's a good way to get familiar with Docker. So Docker is a virtualization software. It's a way of distributing software, or in another sense, installing it with minimum complication and being able to distribute it to people who may want to share your software, or if you want to use somebody else's software. And it's a really handy system. It's powerful. It's really the lightest way of sharing software that I can think of, because with a few lines of text, you can define in a Dockerfile. We'll talk a little bit more about that. All you need to essentially set up and run your software. And one of the great things about Docker with respect to CyVerse is that it runs behind all the machinery in the discovery environment. It's actually how we install and run software now, and within the discovery environment, which is one of our main or most commonly used environment for users. Not the only one by any means. But Docker is pretty useful in all the others too. But if for you people who are new to CyVerse, I'm going to go through quickly a quick explanation of why you may be interested in the discovery environment, and why why you may be interested in CyVerse, because see, for example, how the discovery environment works. And you can see from this page, this is the page for the discovery environment if you've logged into it. And any user can access this, and it's easy to get access. All you need is a username and password. You have a data window, apps window, and analyses window, all of which provide access to storing your data, apps for running jobs with your data, and analyses window for monitoring the jobs and for retrieving the results. Now, if let's say, for example, you're interested in running the FastQC Plus app, which is the one that we're using as an example today, and you've opened up the apps window, clicked on FastQC Plus, and this is what you see first. You see a a little window. You can rename the analysis to whatever you want, just to help you keep track of what you're doing in terms of jobs. And then if you hit the select input data, you see the data input window here. And data input can be done by hitting the add button or just drag and drop from your data window, example here. And then you would click launch analysis and the job would run. So literally in a few seconds, all you have to do is drag in your data, set any parameters if there are any for a specific app, hit launch analysis, and it's running. And you can open the analyses window and monitor it, and then when it's done, click here and get the results. And when you do that, after the FastQC Plus app has run, this is what you would typically see. The reports directory that has all the information from your FastQC runs for all the FastQ files that you've put into that. And this is oriented towards biologists, but if you, for example, are a geologist, you may not be interested in the FastQC Plus app too much, but this still gives you an idea of how an app can run. And in this case, because this is an HTML summary file for the results, you can click on that and look at a summary of the results for the different FastQC files. So this gives you a taste of how the discovery environment can quickly take you from your data stored in the data store, run an app with it, and get your results. And as you said, that all runs with the benefit of Docker. And another environment that we may want to at least mention here is the Atmosphere, which is our cloud computing system that allows you to configure and run an instance, a running instance of a Linux computer, and work on it as you need. And look at this. There's, for example, an image available for anybody to use, ready to set up and run, get running literally in a few minutes. And then you would have a computer system configured with Docker where you can run Docker, and therefore you can run any software that's installed in Docker. And that's very powerful. But let's say you have software and you want to be able to run it in Atmosphere or have it installed in the discovery environment. You may have any kind of computer, a Mac, a Windows laptop, a desktop computer. Maybe you work on a server and do command line work a lot. Maybe your software is installed this way. Maybe your software looks like this when it runs. It's just that it's just a script that you wrote and you would like to share. Maybe your software is binary format and is not much to look at, but it's can run very powerfully. All of these, once they are installed in your computer system, which may look like this on the inside, can run and with the help of an operating system. But it gets complicated when you're talking about software coming from different environments and how to install it, working with getting it to work with your computer system or sharing it with others with other computer systems. But what helps a lot with this kind of problem is the Docker engine. the Docker engine sits between your software and your computer system and functions essentially as an adapter. It provides a universal connection between a computer system and a configured set of software that you want to be able to run or that you want other people to be able to share. And so this is a simple diagram of how it sort of looks. You have your hardware down here, and then running on the hardware is your operating system, whatever that might be. And then you have your Docker engine, which provides, despite whatever environment it's running on, everything that's needed to run these different images. This is what we call this combination of apps and its binaries and libraries, everything that it needs to run. And once it's installed and available in a Docker engine, then we call it an image. When it's running, we call it a container. And so you see 3 different containers, for example, running on with the benefit of this Docker engine. So a very quick glossary of some of the terms. The image is a snapshot of the software. The container is an instance of the Docker image when it's running. And a Dockerfile, which is a really great thing, is a set of instructions for essentially for installing your software. And Docker helps you set up a Docker file. Once you have a Docker file, which, as I said earlier, can literally consist of just a couple inches of text. It is a text file, very small, very lightweight, and yet with that simple Docker file, you can distribute your software to anyone, and they can run it with the benefit of Docker. It's a great way to store your software for the future and for distributing it, and it's what we need if we're going to install your software in the discovery environment. And we'll learn more about that when Apendra takes over in a few minutes. So if you want to learn more about images and containers, then again, on the Docker website, there are little tutorials, if you haven't already done them, to learn more about Docker and how to work with it. And then just to look over again what we've been talking about and think about it a little more. Docker provides us a way of creating apps in the DE. Dockerized apps run in a fairly slim manner. We can minimize the resources they use. It makes it a bit easier, more streamlined to install software using Docker. It makes it possible in some cases where sometimes I look at some software and I feel like, given the system that I'm working on, if I am just using my own computer system, I realize I just can't install this software unless I wipe this computer and start all over again. But Docker enables you to essentially start with a whole new environment whenever you want to build software within it, and put that into a Docker file. So why do you want to use Docker? Well, again, because it gives you a way of putting apps into the discovery environment and using them in Atmosphere too. If you're a developer, or if you just like to write scripts occasionally, or if you teach classes, or if you work sometimes in collaboration with others, or if you're publishing a paper and you want to distribute software or just the workflow that you're using. Docker allows you to share a specific app. It allows you to share a specific version of an app that you can more or less guarantee that is going to run for now and in the future. And you can share a whole analysis pipeline too. So, and so anybody can use your software on any computer running Docker. And anybody can use your software on the discovery environment or in Atmosphere. So it really is quite powerful that way. It gives you a lot to have Docker, but also to use it with CyVerse. And one other thing, if you Dockerize a tool, that is, install it in a Docker environment, you can then store it on the Docker Hub, and you can share it with others. You can make it public so that anybody can use it, or you can just share it with specific people, specific users. And that can be very handy for you too, because other people, other users have already installed a lot of software and have shared their Docker images on the Docker Hub or their Docker files. And those are available for you too. So it's really handy to have that available. So I think it's about time to move on from the broad explanations and actually get into talking about how to make an app. But before that, we'll get to some questions, I guess. Let me see. What are the questions that I should be looking at? Okay, no questions. Oh, okay, I thought we might have had some. So if there are no questions for me at this point, the more fun part in some ways is coming next with Upendra, who's going to explain how to actually do some work with Docker. And so I should stop sharing my screen. And I am muted now. Yes.
It's okay now.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Roger, for the nice about Docker and how you.
Guys, one of you. Whoa, Upendra.
So, my name is Upendra Devishetty, and I recently joined as a science analyst at CyVerse a couple of months ago. So one of my jobs at CyVerse is to integrate the bioinformatics tools into CyVerse discovery environment and sometimes Atmosphere, and also to teach how you can do that through some webinars or workshops and something like that. That's the reason why I choose to do this. I choose to participate in this webinar. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this webinar is to show you one app that Roger briefly mentioned in his talk, FastQC Plus app, and then how you can actually bring that tool to CyVerse discovery environment, and you can actually install it and then use it and test it. And then you can also make it public, or you can just share with your collaborators and so on. So I'm going to demo this using this document, and don't worry, this document will be shared with you at the end of this webinar, and also the presentation, the recording, and the code for this webinar with this demo will be shared with you right after the webinar. Okay, so so here is a snapshot of the FastQC Plus app that Roger briefly mentioned. So for those of you who are not aware of this, FastQC is a bioinformatics app that's very, very popular when it got introduced. So the one of the jobs of this FastQC app is to use this to check the quality of your next generation sequencing data. And for people who are working in next generation sequencing, realize that how important it is to check your next generation sequencing data before you can use the data for all those downstream analysis. We will see this more in the rest of my demo. Okay, so how you can make this app in CyVerse Discovery environment? Well, it's not that hard. You only have to follow 6 steps that I mentioned in this document, starting from installing Docker and then creating a Dockerfile, build the Docker image, build the FastQC plus image using the Dockerfile and test it before you can request the installation of the Dockerized tool into the CyVerse Discovery environment. You can create a user interface that is shown in this snapshot, and then you can test your app, and finally that's it. So you only have to follow these 6 steps when you use Docker for the first time. But like after you install your Docker, you just need to follow steps 2 to 6. Okay, so let's get started then. Okay, so the first step in Dockerizing your tools in CyVerse Discovery environment is installing Docker. As Roger mentioned a lot in his presentation, that Docker can be installed and it is installed on any of the software, any of the operating system. Like if you may be using Linux, PC, Mac, Fedora, Red Hat, anything, you can install Docker quite easily. I'm not going to go into the details of how you can install Docker because there's a lot of information available out there on the web. And also I have listed a few links for the same, like how you can install Docker on Linux using Docker Engine, PC and Mac using Docker Toolbox. And I also listed some video series that I found very, very useful, and I followed that to install Docker on my Linux machine as well as on my PC, on my Mac. So I advise you to take a look at those links when you have time. Okay, so after you install your Docker, so the next step is to create a Dockerfile. Again, as Rosa mentioned in his talk, Dockerfile is a very, very simple text file containing the instructions and commands that you need to build a Docker image. I'm going to what I'm going to do is just to get started with creating the Dockerfile, and then when the tool is building, I'm going to go and explain what each of this line is doing. So let's get started. So I'm just going to copy this. I mean, the first 2 commands are very, very basic commands. What they does is just creating a directory called make FastQC plus, and then changing into the directory. Okay, I'm just going to copy and paste this. I hope you can all see my screen. I have magnified it enough so that you can all see it. Okay, so I mean, this is optional and you don't need to create a folder, but it would be good to organize the tools tools for a particular folder. Like for example, if you're dealing with several apps or have several tools, it would be good to organize them in a separate folder, which I'm doing right now. Okay, so the next thing is creating the Docker file that I mentioned briefly earlier. So again, I'm going to copy this. Don't worry what this Docker file is. I'm going to explain this in a minute. So again, I'm going to copy this and then open a text editor. You can use Emacs, gedit, or any other like Sublime Text or any other text editor. I'm using VI because it's already installed on my Linux machine. And then I'll just type Dockerfile and then copy and paste it. Okay. And then I'm saving the Docker file. Okay, and that's it. You just have to make a folder for a specific app and then create a Docker file. And the next thing is you build and test the image. So how you do that is, again, it's a very, very simple command. I'm going to copy this and then paste. Okay, so before you actually type in this command, so you make sure that your installation of Docker is successful. How do you check that? Is simply just by typing Docker. And if you see output something like this, that means you are good to go to the next step. And there's also another command that I regularly use to test if the Docker is installed or not, by simply docker run hello world. So what this command is doing is it is running a particular image called hello world. So in the backend, there's several things going on. So as you can see here, just by typing this command, like there are 4 processes going on. So I'm not going to go into the details of this because it's a little bit tricky to explain this at this point, but I sincerely advise you to take a look at like what this output and all. But like to make it short, so if you type Docker and if you type Docker run a particular image, and if you see an output something like this, then your installation is successful. So I'm going to clear the screen and then build the image now. Okay, so while this is building, I'm going to go back to my document and then try to explain you what this Dockerfile is doing. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, Dockerfile is a simple text file containing the instructions and commands specific for a specific tool. So some of this may be common for different tools or software, but most of that is specific for a tool. What do I mean by specific? We'll get into that soon. So Dockerfile typically starts with from command and ends with an entry point. And what from does is it's a command to pull the base image from the Docker Hub, which hosts all the trusted images. Like the Docker guys have already built some images and then they posted it there. So what we are trying to do is just pulling that image from the Docker Hub. So the from command actually does this. And the next line, the second and third line are basically optional, but I again recommend you to include that in your Dockerfile. The second line of code is saying who the maintainer of this Dockerfile. In this case, is Rosa, and also it would be good to include the email. Like for example, if you find that the Dockerfile is not working, you can always email the maintainer and post your queries there. And the third line of code is the label description. Again, this is optional, but it's recommended. So the label description is a description about what the particular app is doing. In this case, the app, this is an image for running FastQC and creating an output HTML file. What do you mean by that? You'll see soon. And the next few lines of code, like fourth, fifth, is basically we are trying to install all the dependencies that are needed for a particular tool. In this case, FastQC tool. You might ask, like, how do I know what dependencies that I need for a particular app? Well, the easiest place to look at it is the instruction manual for a particular software. Nowadays, all the instruction manuals gives a detailed information of how you can install, and in future maybe they will also come up with a Dockerfile. So you don't need to even create a Dockerfile in future. You just need to copy and paste, and then you can build your image quite easily. And the next few lines of code is basically pulling out the software that we needed and then unzipping it, changing the permissions, and then copying it into user bin, that is to make it executable. And then this FastQC app also needs some other dependencies. This is a Perl module that we need, and what we are trying to do here is to install the particular Perl module. Again, the syntax is slightly complicated, but So the point here is to pull a particular module, per module that are needed for this FastQC app. And then the last few lines of code is basically, so this FastQC app is a slight modification of FastQC Plus app, is a slight modification of the FastQC. If I have time, I'll show you what the difference between FastQC and FastQC Plus. Basically, to make this app more appealing so that we can display all the results on one web page, Rosa modified, Rosa used a wrapper script and then put the software in there, and then that's how you can generate multiple results on a single web page. So the next few lines of code basically does that. And finally, the entry point, which I think is the most important, especially in the case of bringing your tools in CyVerse discovery environment. So the entry point is a command that runs without any arguments. And you basically need this to be able to install your app into discovery environment. Okay, so let's go back and see what the status of the build. So the reason why this is taking so much time is because when we bring the base image, the next step is to update that the base image. So it's basically updating the entire image, and this is a time-consuming process. So, but I already built the image for you. Okay, so here is the image that I built because I know that we can't build an image because this is beyond the scope of this webinar, because it takes at least like 20 minutes to be able to build an image. So I already built the image, and if you type Docker images, and you should see if your image is successful, you should see that you should see this particular output saying that successfully built, and there's some ID. You don't need to worry about what that ID is. And if you type in sudo docker images, then your built-in image should be at the top of this all the images. If you're doing for the first time, you only have 1 or 2 images depending on how many you build. Since I built so many, so there's so many images there. But I want you to look at this particular image called FastQC Plus Test. Along with the name of this image, it has some other metadata, like tag, image ID created, how much size is that, and so on. This is very useful. If you keep on using the Docker, you will realize how important the other metadata is. Again, for the scope of this particular webinar, I'm not going to go into the details. Okay, so our image is successfully built, and we already checked that the image is already there. So the next thing is to test your image. How do you do that? Again, is simple. Sorry, I need to do sudo every time. Okay, so don't worry about the misses above. So what I want you to focus on is this particular line that says uses, and then the FastQC Plus app, and then the arguments that are needed to pass on to this particular image, which are FastQ1 or FQ1, FastQ2, and FQ2, and so on. So just by making sure that the image is already built successfully, and also you can run without any argument, and you should see the help information, you can be confident enough to say that the image is built successfully, and then we are ready to move this image to the next stage, which is installing it on the CyVerse discovery environment. But there's still one more test we need to do before you do that. So what is this test? Well, right now we haven't tested it with any input arguments. When I typed in -h, it only shows you what the uses of this particular image is. But I want, but CyVerse strongly recommend that you test your image using some input data, so which we will do right now. So okay, here is the code for doing that. So again, I make a some scratch directory, and then change to that particular directory, and then and we have provided some test data which are unfortunately stored on CyVerse data store. So in order to grab those input data, you need iCommands. That's what I'm doing right now. So I'm using iGet, which is basically pulling out the data that is stored on iRots and to the current directory. So again, I'm going to copy this and paste. Oh, sorry. Okay, but this is a very small file. These are very small files, and so it didn't take long time to pull them into current working directory. So I'll do ls, and you should see those two files already got deposited into the current directory. Okay, now we are ready to test your image. Okay, so let me copy and paste this, and I'll show you what this particular one is doing. Okay, so while it is running, I'll explain you what this is doing. So Docker run, as I shown you earlier, is a command to run your image, and -v, what this option does is it mounts the current scratch directory onto the host machine as /working directory, and -w sets the working directory inside the container to the same /working directory. And this is a little bit hard to understand, but basically what we are trying to do is, rather than moving all the test data into the container or the Docker image, what we are trying to do is we are trying to mount the current working directory into some directory inside the container, so that you don't need to stuff your Docker container. The problem with moving all the unnecessary data or the test data into Docker container is you increase the size of this, and you create problems with running and all the running efficiently of this Docker image. So we advise you to follow this particular syntax, so that you don't increase the size of the Docker image. Okay, so it seems that it ran okay, and there's no error. So I'll do ls.lh, and I see there are two output files, FOSQC summary.html and individual underscore reports. So these are the two output files that Roger showed in this app. So again, the outputs of this outputs of a particular app depends on the particular app, and in this case, this is what we expect to get. So now we are in a position to move our tool to any other infrastructure. In this case, I'm going to talk about CyVerse Discovery environment. So I'm going to pause here for a while and then answer any questions that you might have, because we are going to move now from command line environment to CyVerse Discovery environment. Okay. Do we have any questions?
So Upendra, there, we've sort of been answering as we go along. If you want to add anything, if you scroll back up to where participant Eric Lyons asked if you could explain how someone figures out how command.
Yevin's son has issues with installing the new Docker on VirtualBox. Okay. Okay, I think Roger took care of that, and Roger and Nirav took care of that. Okay.
And we had some questions about how do you know what commands to put in for installing, but we've been discussing that a little bit while you're giving the presentation.
Yeah.
The other question is whether or not sudo is required.
Taking care of those questions. So I think if there's no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and demo how you can
Upendra?
emails to CyVerse Discover environment. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so you can see my screen?
I see your screen.
Okay, so after you test your image, the next step, at least in the case of CyVerse Discover environment, is to request installation of the Dockerfile tool. So what do I mean by requesting installation of the Dockerfile tool is, so you need to bring your Dockerfile to the Discover environment. Right now, we don't have a system in place to bring your image to the Discover environment because we build the image for you. So what you have to do before bringing requesting installation of the Docker tool is just to make sure that the Dockerfile that you want to Docker as a tool is working properly. Okay, so I'm going to log into Discover environment. Sorry for this, I don't know, for some reason. Can you log in?
Let's see.
Sorry, there's some issues loading the Discover environment.
Yeah, Upendra, I can't log in right now either. Upendra, I think it's just not gonna, we're having the problem with the network again.
Okay, so what I'm going to do while we fix that issue is I'm going to go through a document that we prepared.
Yeah, better.
Upendra, while you've stopped now, someone is asking, C. Childers has asked about whether or not you have to use sudo.
Okay, sorry for that technical issue loading the Discover environment, but like while we try to fix that, I want to show the document that again I'm going to provide a link to you at the end of this webinar is the document. You guys hear Martha asking questions? Is the document that we prepared for Dockerizing your tools in the Discovery environment. This is by far the comprehensive document that we have on our CyVerse wiki. So it basically explains you everything right from what Docker is to how you can import your tools into Docker Discovery environment. Since the webinar time is short, going through this document is beyond the scope of this webinar. So you can see we have a pipeline here. So while we try to fix the discovery environment issue, I'm going to go to this particular workflow that basically explains how you can bring your tools into discovery environment. So you can skip the left-hand step, and then focus on this particular one that says create a Dockerfile. I already showed you how you can create a Dockerfile. Once you create a Dockerfile, you submit a tool request along with the Dockerfile in the discovery environment. If you can fix the network issues, then I can show you how you can do that. But regardless of that, the first step, once you make sure that the Dockerfile is working, is submitting your tool request in the discovery environment. And once you do that, you have to wait until it gets approved. So you basically get a confirmation email from the DE team saying that, hey, your tool request has been completed. Once you do that, the next step is you can go ahead and create an user interface for your app. What do you mean by that is this. So here is a user interface for FastQC app. Basically, you have some optional user interface, and then there's mandatory arguments. In this case, all the arguments are mandatory. One of the argument is input file. So here is a widget that shows how you can select the FastQ file. Okay, so once you create an user interface, that again, I will show you if we can fix the network issues. And once you do that, you test your app. The way that you test your app is similar to how you test your image on the command line in the Docker. So you can use some dash data, and then you can upload it to the FastQC Plus app and launch an analysis. And if the app works the way that you intended to, then you're good. You can go ahead and use it for your analysis, or you can make it public so that other people can use it, or you can just share it with some few collaborators that you're interested. And if you think that the app is not working, then you should go back to the drawing board, and then you try to fix the Dockerfile, and then you repeat the same process. It seems that the network issues have been resolved, so I'm going to go back and see. Okay, so it seems that the network issues have been resolved. So I have already logged into Discovery environment, and so this is the user interface for the Discovery environment. This is very neat and clean. What you basically have are three windows: the data window, apps window, and then the analysis window. Data window is where you can see all the data in different folders, and apps basically show. Apps provide you the user interface where you can design, request, use, search all the apps, and analysis window basically shows you the output from your tools. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and click on the apps because we are gonna create a user interface for app. Once I click on the apps, so this is what I see. So what you're seeing here is my workspace, and if you have any apps that you're working on, it will all be displayed in the workspace. Right now, I have like 10 different apps that I'm working on, so they all are displayed in the workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the apps tab, and if you click on that, you should see different options. One of the options that we are interested for today's webinar is the request tool app. So if you click that app, it will ask you to provide all the metadata for your tool. Like, for example, what is the name of the tool, and briefly describe the tool, and how do you want to submit your tools request. So this is basically how you want to provide your Dockerfile. Again, as I said, I want to reiterate that currently there's no setup to upload your emails directly into the CyVerse Discovery environment. What you have to do is just provide the Docker file. We will image it for you, and then we will send you a email confirmation. And once you get that, then you can go ahead and design your user interface. Anyway, I'm not going to go into each and every details of that because we are running late, so I'm going to skip this. We already have done this for FastQC app. So once you do that, you get an email confirmation about your tool. Once you get an email confirmation, again, you log into Discovery environment, which might take, the email confirmation might take around 24 to 48 hours or more, depending on how busy the software team is. So the next step after email confirmation, after requesting a tool request and then getting an email, is to create a new user interface. So just by clicking on the create app, you should see something like this. Again, this is very simple. So on the left hand side, you have all the tools that you need for creating a new app. And on the middle, you see what tools you want to use. So right now, we want to use the FastQC app. So let's look for FastQC Plus. There it is. We already imaged it for you. So that's why you are seeing that in the box. And then you can name your app test FastQC Plus demo. Okay, and then what you basically need for this app, again, it depends on the app. Some apps require some complicated command line arguments, so you have to. So that's why we provided all the different widgets, each of which is doing a different thing. So right now, what you just need is a widget that accepts input files. In this case, so you can just select this input file widget here and then drop it here. But the good thing about this FastQC Plus app is it takes multiple files. So if you want to use that capability, then I would advise you to use this widget that basically says multiple input files. So I'm going to label this multiple input files, and then I'm going to check this box. This basically says that the user have to provide the input files. Without input files, it throws an error. So I'm checking this box, which basically tells the app that this field is required. And then I'm just going to leave rest of the other options as default, and then I'm going to save this. It takes a few seconds to save it. Okay, so the app is saved, so you can go ahead and close this. And once it is saved, then you should see the particular app that you're working on under apps under development. So here it is, FastQC Plus demo. So I'll just click on this, and then so this is the same interface that Rosa showed earlier. The only thing that might be different is we named it as different compared to Rosa. So I'm going to go ahead and test this app, which is the next step in Dockerizing your tools, and then add some test data. And if you know the path of the test data, then you can just type in. Since I know where the test data is, I'm going to paste this link. that shows the path. Okay, don't worry about that. You can also drag and drop that Rosa mentioned in his talk. Okay, so this is fairly simple. You just drag and drop, or you can browse to the particular folder where your input files are, and then launch the analysis. And that's pretty much it. Then you should get a message here saying that the FastQC Plus demo has started. Again, for the sake of this webinar, I already ran this, and I'm going to show you how the results look like. Okay, so here it is. So this is the analysis window. When you click on that, you should see a folder for the particular run. In this case, FastQC Plus app. And here are the outputs. These are exactly the same as Roger showed earlier.
Actually,
no, sorry. This is the wrong one. Sorry. I was testing different things.
Yeah.
This is FastQC, and I already have FastQC Plus. My apologies.
Yes, my app is better than that.
What? Okay, so here is a summary. Okay, here it is. So this is exactly the same as Rosa showed it in his presentation. So contrast to FastQC app, FastQC Plus displays the results of all the input files in one single HTML file, whereas the FastQC normal app just does one result or one HTML at a time, whereas this shows all the results of all the input files in one line. Okay, so this is pretty much of how you can start from installing your Docker, right, to how you can bring your tools into a discovery environment. And there's several other options, like you can edit your app, you can play around with the different options and so on. So I sincerely recommend you to take a look at the Docker wiki that we prepared, that I shown you earlier for doing that. Okay, just to wrap it up, I have provided some references for the understanding or for the working on basically what is Docker. So this clicking on this link will take you to the Docker website, where they have vast information of how you can use Docker for Dockerizing. And as mentioned earlier, so Docker in Discovery Environment link will take you to the CyVerse wiki page, where we put together of how you can bring your tools right from background of what Docker is to the final testing of your Docker. And then we also provided some good test cases, some examples, and detailed information of how you can Dockerize your tools. And finally, if you are feeling like you're confident enough now to Dockerize some tool, I have provided some the GitHub page where you can play with Megahead, which is a tool for doing the alignment for metagenomics, and then bringing that into Discovery Environment. since this tool is not already installed on CyVerse Discovery environment, so you can go ahead and complete this exercise and bring the tool into Discovery environment, and then share it with your collaborator, friend, or also make it public, and then see how you can do that quite easily using CyVerse Discovery environment. So with that, I'm going to stop here, and then I'll answer any questions that you might have. Again, apologies for the network issues that we had during this webinar, and we're also planning to have many more webinars on the Docker. The next webinar will be like in a couple of months' time, where we have some advanced features using Docker, like bringing your image into Discovery environment, as well as using you can specify how many cores you want for the particular Docker image, and so on. Okay.
Okay, so as soon as Upendra unmutes the speaker on his computer, he will be able to hear me. I know the rest of you can. Please, if you have any additional questions, go ahead and type them into the chat window. Upendra, have you unmuted your speaker? You can't hear me. Okay, I'm gonna step out for a minute. Oh, okay. So can you, yeah. If you would unmute now, you can hear me and hear Nirav if he speaks. Can you hear me yet, Upendra? No. Oh, but you're muted now. Your microphone is muted.
We can hear you now. Oops.
That's, yeah, Roger, you need to stay muted. Okay. Okay, so everyone, sorry about that. We're in different rooms. So Nirav, you can also speak up if you want to make any final comments.
I'm not seeing any questions. I think, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So there was a question about R very early on, and hopefully that has been addressed, but it doesn't really matter. As long as you have something that runs on Linux, it can be brought in. The things that cannot be brought in and work well are jobs that require specialized networking. For example, MPI jobs that go beyond the number of cores, those are not suitable. So HPC style jobs, currently not suitable. But if you have something that's between 1 to 12 core, that really works well. You can do interesting things. Right now, we do limit some of the jobs to 4 cores, but by summer, we lift that limit away. The other thing that is not suitable is interactive jobs. So if you want to, for example, display or application that has a GUI or a web interface, currently we disallow that for security, and later on this year we will open it up. So those are sort of the considerations to be had. The important thing to note is that when you try to run something with Docker on your desktop or laptop or your own server, the biggest thing that you need to worry about is the size of data and moving it around. And that is what is already done for you in CyVerse, so you don't have to worry about it. When you saw Upendra drag and drop or select files, it didn't matter if that file was 1 meg or 10 gigs. All of that works for you. Similarly, if somebody has shared a file with you in CyVerse, you can then take that and run it through the same analysis. And lastly, you saw how Upendra gave the walkthrough of making a UI. So any command line app that you have, you can make a web UI very quickly. And lastly, there was a question about pipelines. And yes, if you are creating pipelines, you have 2 options. One is you consolidate all of them into one Docker file, which sometimes is not very suitable. But if it's a very linear pipeline, you can use the pipeline tool in the discovery environment and just lay them out, and each of them can be separate Docker applications, and they will run taking the output of one and making it as an input of the next one. So that is feasible. And then if you have very complex pipelines, the two systems that we use, Pegasus and Makeflow, WorkQ, they both do support Docker, and we are happy to talk to you about it. So either drop a note to Martha or CyVerse support, and somebody can show you how that's done. So with that, I'll stop and see if there are more questions.
Okay, since I'm not seeing any questions come into the chat window, what I'd like to do is remind everyone that if you have follow-up questions or comments, please use the Ask forum to submit those, and somebody will get back to you. That's the best place for, community-wide sharing. And the other thing is I will be sending out an email that has links to all of the materials used in the webinar. Later on tonight, the high-resolution video recording will be available. So watch for that. And then the last thing that I ask is I do include a link to a really short survey, honest it's short. If you would give us your feedback so that we can help improve these webinars or suggest new topics you'd like to hear about, or if you have something you'd like to present, let us know. So with that, I will thank Roger and Upendra and all of the participants for calling in, and I apologize for the glitches this morning. Thank you. Have a nice Friday and a good weekend.
Thank you.